Out. Okay, we'll see what happens. This meeting is being live streamed. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our town hall talk on human trafficking. For those who don't know me, I am State Representative Christine Hunschofsky, and I represent District 96, which includes Coconut Creek, Parkland, parts of Margate, and parts of Coral Springs. And I'm very thrilled that we have with us tonight Erin Collins, who is the Executive Director of the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. For a little background on Erin, Erin has served as the Executive Director since October 2019 and has nearly 2 decades of experience in advocacy, communications, and public policy. She previously served in the administrations of Governor Ron DeSantis and Governor Rick Scott. Prior to her role in state government, she served as a consultant with National Strategies, a state and local government consulting firm, assisting clients with business development and procurement-related activities. Erin also held various positions with Florida Tax Watch, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit taxpayer research institute, and government watchdog. Erin is a past statewide chair of the Junior Leagues of Florida State Public Affairs Committee and currently serves on its board of directors. She is a sustainer member of the Junior League of Tallahassee, having served in various leadership roles over the last 10 years. She is an active member of Florida Blue Key, Capital Area Gator Club, and Leadership Tallahassee Class 39. But the best part about Erin is that she was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and I say that as a native Bostonian myself, and she was raised in Jupiter, Florida. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and a Bachelor of Science in Telecommunication from the University of Florida, and she resides in Tallahassee with her husband and 2 stepdaughters. And with that, Erin, thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Representative Hunschofsky, and everyone for joining us this evening. Again, I'm actually celebrating 2 years with the organization today, and I'm so pleased to be with you to share a little bit more about the organization, our training, prevention, and awareness efforts, and a little bit more about the horrible exploitation of human trafficking. You're going to hear a lot of different statistics and numbers from me this evening, but if there's only one thing that I hope you remember, it's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is 888-3737-888. So human trafficking every year impacts millions of women and children and men around the world, including right here in the United States and unfortunately in the state of Florida. The National Human Trafficking Hotline receives the 3rd most amount of calls from our state. According to the International Labor Organization, roughly 40 million people are trafficked and exploited worldwide. It can happen in any community. Victims can be any age, any race, any gender, any nationality. And human trafficking is the largest, fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. It generates $150 billion in illegal profits every year. And sex trafficking in particular disproportionately impacts women and children. The average age of a child when forced into a sex trafficking situation is between the ages of 12 and 14 years old. And women and girls make up 80% of the people trafficked transnationally. So kind of a level set for individuals who might not be familiar with human trafficking. It involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. And traffickers look for people who are susceptible in for a variety of reasons, including physiological or emotional vulnerabilities, economic hardship, lack of a social safety net or a community safety net, natural disasters, and political instability. Traffickers use violence, manipulation in some cases, false promises of well-paying jobs, romantic relationships to lure their victims into trafficking situations. Other things to consider: language barriers, fear of their traffickers, fear of law enforcement frequently keep victims from seeking help, making human trafficking a truly hidden crime. The trauma caused by traffickers is often so great that many victims don't identify as such. Those trauma bonds, those relationships have been made and groomed with their trafficker. So most of the times victims don't ask for help, even in highly public settings. Social media and the internet is a huge part of the equation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later as it relates to human trafficking. Misinformation, stereotypes can spread quickly through technology, and it's often, challenging to decipher what's fact versus fiction. For instance, I'm sure we've all seen those photographs of a victim, tied up in chains or handcuffs in a basement. Kidnapping, those types of situations, people with a van coming through your community are really rare. And so we want to dispel some of those myths and those fictions. A lot of the times it's individuals who know their perpetrator, who have met them online or through another social network within their community. So here are some signs in human trafficking, and I'll note that not all are present in a trafficking situation, and there might be some that aren't listed, but these are a lot of common ones. And recognizing these key indicators is the first step in identifying victims and can potentially help save a life. So questions to ask yourself, does a person appear disconnected from their family or their friends, their community, their school, their houses of worship? Has a child stopped attending school if they're of school age? Does a person appear timid or fearful, submissive? Are there physical signs that this individual has been deprived of water or sleep, medical care? Does an individual live in unsuitable living conditions? Are they able to move from place to place? Are there unreasonable security measures? And again, not all indicators listed here are present in every trafficking situation, and the presence and or absence doesn't necessarily mean that a human trafficking situation is occurring. There are other potential signs that are more physical in nature: burn marks, bruises, cuts. An individual might be less appropriately dressed than maybe before you knew them, before they got into an exploitive situation. Does an individual brag about having a lot of money or material items? Are they showing these things to you? Tattoos are another way where pimps and johns brand their victims. And then is an individual hanging out with a different crowd? Is there an older boyfriend, new friends with a different lifestyle, maybe potential gang involvement? So everyone has a potential to discover a human trafficking situation. While sometimes these victims are, held against their will behind closed doors, they're often hidden in plain sight, right in front of us. That could be at a restaurant or a nail salon. It could be in agricultural fields, in hotels or motels or construction sites. Sometimes traffickers' use of coercion and manipulation are so great that these individuals don't want to do anything to harm themselves or their families because they've been threatened. So sometimes if you reach out to an individual, they might be too fearful to accept your help. So I want to briefly mention the pandemic and human trafficking and some of the correlated issues. Safer at home was definitely not safe for all, unfortunately, last year. Human trafficking and COVID-19 both have something in common, which is they take advantage of the most vulnerable through a lot of different inequities that are prevalent in our society. It can happen to anyone, just like human trafficking, but COVID-19 and human trafficking are a lot less, are more likely to happen to individuals who are facing hardships like poverty, lack of access to healthcare. Loss of jobs, loss of income, potential loss of housing. I know there's been a lot of challenges throughout the country and here in Florida because related to COVID-19. So it's created a whole new class of victims, potentially putting those individuals more at risk for an exploitive or trafficking situation. Traffickers were more easily reaching out to vulnerable populations because of higher unemployment rates, universal economic collapses in some countries, increased screen time, which is a huge component, loss of community support systems, that breakdown of kind of the fundamental fabric of our networks has really exposed more inequities and individuals potentially facing hardships. Again, which all open the door to individuals to be lured into a trafficking situation by force, fraud, or coercion. There are individuals that we heard through our partners last year that were survivors of human trafficking that were actually contacted by their traffickers many years later. There are individuals who might have lost their job, who are thriving survivors, but because of the pandemic, were seriously considered or went back into the life. So there's a lot of different components that we need to make sure that we're educating ourselves on, talking about with our elected officials, and being part of this conversation this evening is one key step in that. We actually heard, which is shocking, that landlords were even advertising room shares in exchange for sex on social media sites like Craigslist. So digging into the state of Florida, this was a report that was just released last week by the Department of Children and Families. They're required annually to prepare this report that compiles the commercial sexual exploitation, CSEC, reports and labor trafficking. And you'll see that there were a little over 2,000 reports during the last fiscal year. These investigative types are tracked for caregivers, institutional, other, but for the cases that allege commercial sexual exploitation of a child, those are reports coming from adult entertainment establishments, escort services, prostitution, and then for the labor side, obviously labor trafficking, slavery, or indentured servitude, things that do not appear to be sexual in nature. The number of reports accepted by the Florida Abuse Hotline involved 1,750 children. And then out of those reports, 93% were female and 7 were male. The county level data showed that Broward County received the most alleged reports with 204, followed by Orange County with 162 and Miami-Dade with 158. So there's a couple things that I do want to note with the reports from the 1920 to 2021 fiscal year. There was a drop in reports at the end of the 1920 year. As we all know, COVID-19 shut down a lot of different things. Educators and people involved in our school districts are mandatory reporters. And if students weren't in their classrooms, educators and others could not potentially report that abuse. Additionally, for the uptick for this past year, laws went into effect in July of 2020 that required hospitality and tourism employees and folks at public lodging establishments to take a training by the beginning of this calendar year, January 1st. So that increased reports were attributed to an increase, the training efforts with those industries, which as a destination for a lot of different types of activities, our hotel, motel, and restaurant and lodging association employees are so important in spotting and reporting trafficking. The other thing with the increased reports last year, even though we were not able to gather in person for trainings and in-person events, our organization alone trained over 5,000 individuals within the hospitality and tourism and general public, but a lot of different community partners, advocates, and the state offered virtual, more frequent trainings. So that's another factor that can go into the increased number of reports. The other thing I'll lastly note from the report is that the female to male gender that was noted in the report, 83% were female victims, and the remaining 18 were associated for male victims, which actually indicated a 1% increase for male victims, which the report from the Department of Children and Families noted there are more extensive trainings for how to work with male victims conducted by the Department of Children and Families and also community partners. So the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office and some other sheriff's offices around the state publish 21 apps that parents should know. And I think this is so important because we are on our devices more now than ever. Obviously, last year with our children learning remotely and virtually, they're required to use these devices. But what are they doing with them? There's some apps on here that we might be familiar with, WhatsApp, Bumble is a dating site, Snapchat, TikTok. But some of the other ones look like a normal app that you might have in your phone. And I'll point your attention to the calculator app, which is in the second column there. The Sarasota County Sheriff's Office noted that when they had a sting operation at the end of 2019, that these were some of the most popular apps that traffickers and buyers of commercial sex were using. Some of these individuals were on their way to meet children as young as 12. Law enforcement investigators and personnel were posing as children. These men were luring these individuals with a lot of false promises, candy, toys, money. And so it's so important to know the apps, the people that your child is communicating with. We know that mental health is so important to our young children and students, for everyone really, but especially for our young children who are developing. And it's so important to know the apps that they are using. The other thing that I think is so important, the Department of Education here in Florida last year implemented a rule that all students in public K through 12 institutions or entities are required to take age-appropriate human trafficking awareness training. They're required to submit their plans every year to the department by December 1st. Then the department goes through a review of those. I know that Broward County has a whole list of resources on their website, as is every school district required to put on their website. And it's also located on the Department of Education's website. But I will note Broward, the county that you all are in, because we work with them as they were working to develop their plans. There's a lot of great instruction for even the littlest of learners, all the way to high school students. Some of the education that has come from this, some of these, the older students I know in schools across high schools across the state, students have created awareness clubs and advocacy groups to engage with their various networks outside of school, their religious affiliations and congregations, people are in the neighborhood. So it's so wonderful that they want to learn, get educated, share their information with their parents and their surrounding communities. A little bit more about our organization. We were created 2 years ago. We launched January of last year. It's been a personal kind of privilege to grow and from the founding and writing of the organization's bylaws to partnership materials to a training course has been personally, very fruitful and such a privilege for me. But we've had an awesome opportunity to train various industries, personnel across the state, to host town halls, to participate in webinars like these. During the last year, we've participated and hosted over 100 with partners ranging from educators to law enforcement to some dental associations. Everyone in every community should be armed with the information that we're sharing this evening. We, again, trained over 5,000 people in the last year. We have a 1-hour training course that is age appropriate for some of our older learners, I would say middle school and high school. And if you want to put your phone up to that QR code, it'll take you right to a site on our website. It's a 1-hour training course. If you are in a required industry within the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, it has been approved by the department. We work with other healthcare and medical associations to get it approved if you are required for compliance reasons. If you're medical or healthcare personnel, we work with them to get them approved for those training hours. And it's so important. So, quick plug for that training opportunity. And for those required industries, you do receive a certificate of completion at the end of the training, which again, those required industries provide to their employer that they have to report back to the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. Some of the other things that we do are raise funds to help our law enforcement, survivor service providers maintain the quality trauma-informed, survivor-centered programs that they're offering. As you can imagine, nonprofits have been hurt a lot in the last year. They typically don't receive the funding that they should, especially for the populations that they're serving. I will note that the state of Florida invests less than $10 million in direct service providers and care for survivors of human trafficking. I would love to see that increase. Last year, earlier this year, excuse me, we established a Survivors Bill of Rights and launched a Speakers Bureau. We get requested through our board of directors and other partners to host a lot of different types of trainings, whether it's a general awareness training like this evening or more substantive for law enforcement, medical personnel, you name the industry, we can provide the training. And we want to make sure that these organizations are vetted and that if for our survivor leaders who are going out into the community and speaking, that these organizations are reputable, that it's in a safe environment, that they're not being re-exploited. These survivors take time off from their jobs and their work professional lives. So we ensure that if they're not provided an honorarium or their expenses are paid for if they have to travel, that we do that on their behalf, because it's so important, because they're sharing their expertise, their lived experience, to make sure that these types of situations don't happen in the future. The other two quick things that I'll mention are, we strongly support policies that enhance penalties to fight demand. You have to talk about prevention, training, and awareness, which we're doing this evening, but you also have to talk about the other side of the equation for those that are willing to take the risk to buy commercial sex or to employ people for, with false labor practices. And the other thing that we will be focused on in the next fiscal year is centralizing all the different training resources and publications in the state of Florida. There isn't a comprehensive resource guide where you all are in Broward, wherever you are across the state. There are wonderful regional task forces that we work with and partner. But if you wanted to learn more about the organizations, the volunteer groups, where can you get trained or certified? Are there places that you can go to in your community? There's not really a whole kind of comprehensive a listing of that. So we'll actually be filing a piece of a special appropriation to work on that in the next fiscal year, should it be approved by the state legislature. But we want to make sure that when people get engaged, when people come to town halls and educational opportunities and trainings like this, that they can find the appropriate avenues for anyone to get involved in the community to continue the conversation. I did mention that human trafficking awareness training is required for public lodging establishment employees. We saw a huge uptick in folks from those areas. We partner with the statewide apartment association, other lodging establishments, and it's so important because as people move from place to place, whether they're coming for a concert, a Super Bowl, they're coming to our theme parks, they're coming to our beaches. We want to make sure that the individuals that are there know the signs. There are stories that have been shared from folks from within our board and from law enforcement personnel who work closely around the state that we want the tourists to come here to enjoy our beautiful recreation, our theme parks, everything that the state has to offer. But we want to do that in a safe manner. Florida is closed for business for human trafficking, and it's incumbent upon everyone, but especially because these individuals within this industry are more likely to see a potential trafficking situation and what to do and where to report it. The other folks who are required to take annual training are healthcare and medical personnel. They're required to do that annually. And we work with a lot of different medical and healthcare industries and associations to train their personnel. Ways to get involved and to end human trafficking. We hope that through the education, through our youngest learners and students that are just starting school, that hopefully in their lifetime, they will not have to deal with this horrible scourge. of exploitation. But attending this town hall, taking an hour out of your time is so important. There's great trainings out there. Knowing where your goods and products are made, labor trafficking, especially in our state and certain rural communities, agriculture communities, we're so reliant on that in some of our counties. And we want to make sure that when we're purchasing our favorite coffee or our chocolate, different devices, that those products and those different materials are being sourced in a fair way. It's actually October is Fair Labor Month as well. The International Labor Association or Organization and the Department of Homeland Security, as well as our website, have more information on both labor and sex trafficking. Volunteer with different anti-trafficking efforts. Meeting with your local, state, and federal representatives. Representative Hunschofsky, hosts these town halls, fairly often throughout the year on a variety of topics. She's very accessible, right to your local elected officials. I've worked with a lot of different counties over the last year to draft, if they don't already have something in place, a resolution for their local elected leaders to consider and adopt, putting awareness signs, not just only in different modes and means of transportation, but different businesses. Just because you're not a required industry that has to complete a training doesn't mean that you don't have to learn more about the different examples and types of training. Arming yourself with that information will ultimately end human trafficking. And then obviously educating our children, as I mentioned before. This is the Department of Homeland Security Blue Campaign. They, along with Department of Children and Families and Department of Education, but this is a really good encompassing site for all different types of materials. If you wanted a flyer to put up in your break room, or if you wanted more additional resources for students, different languages, different types of approaches, short videos, the DHS Blue Campaign is fantastic. And that human trafficking awareness hotline number and the text line is so, so important. So I'm going to end with that. My contact information is here. You'll receive this information at the conclusion of the presentation. I just want to thank everyone for taking some time out of their evening towards the end of the week to learn a little bit more about human trafficking, how you can get involved. I know there are several questions in the chat, so we're happy to take those, and just thank you for getting engaged and wanting to learn more about this important topic. Oh, I think you're muted, Representative.
Sorry, I muted myself. Who knew? So Erin, first of all, thank you very much. That was incredibly informative. If I could take the personal privilege to ask the first question, actually, before I ask, I just noticed we have Mayor Becky Tooley from Coconut Creek also on the Zoom call. Hi, Mayor Tooley. Thank you for being here tonight. Erin, I get a lot of comments from people and questions from people regarding, where does human trafficking, where are the victims? Like, where are they finding them? And some people believe they live in a gated community, so it's not going to happen where they are. Could you just, I feel like there's a lot of misinformation about human trafficking victims out there. And if you could just talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Sure. I'll start off by saying, and I mentioned this at the outset, victims of human trafficking can truly be any individual, any race, any age, any gender, from any socioeconomic status. Entertainment, Hollywood, through movies and music, sometimes like to glamorize what they think a trafficking situation looks like because it makes a better movie plot. I'm sure we've all heard, and seen the comparisons to the movie Taken with Liam Neeson. That doesn't really happen. Sure, could that happen, in some situations? Yes, but the prevalence is not as what you would think. Victims who are entering an exploitive situation on the commercial sex side are in middle school. That 12 to 14, fifth, sixth graders. The thing that, again, I would implore everyone, and it's not just for parents of school-aged kids, truly for everybody. Technology is great. We are doing some amazing, innovative, forward-thinking things in our country. However, the bad guys, the traffickers, the criminals are leveraging these great innovative solutions to communicate with our children in ways that sometimes we have no idea. And that can happen in any zip code, in any beautiful, affluent beachside community, or in some of the hardest hit, more impoverished zip codes within our state. So I think that remembering that it's not the glamorized, it's not always individuals from other countries. Yes, that does happen. Yes, certain at-risk factors exacerbate the potential vulnerabilities, but an individual who is coming home to an empty house where both parents are working, maybe their siblings that are around but not engaged, or dropping them off. If there are individuals, within the child welfare system who might be on the cusp of experiencing homelessness, there are factors that increase the potential vulnerabilities for individuals within the child welfare system. But it's almost the same as a child who, has all the cool bells and whistles, the technology devices, because that's how traffickers are in a long period of time in some instances. There's been a lot of cases recently, even here in Florida, unfortunately, where for a period of time, it could be a few weeks, it could be a few months, sometimes it's years, that these traffickers and individuals will cultivate a relationship through gaming apps, through social media apps, TikTok, Snapchat, you name it. So again, really implore you to have the age-appropriate conversations with your families, your students, but knowing that there are very deceptive ways that traffickers are using technology that we need to remember and to keep in mind.
Thank you for that. And then I'm going to go to some of the questions in the chat. We have from Coral Springs Commissioner Joy Carter a question, and she asks, what is a way to advise individuals to understand or recognize that they are being targeted?
Yeah, so I think it's challenging because as humans, we're all different. We all like different things, are friends with different people. I think that, kind of remembering the list of questions to ask yourself, if you know an individual that may not be acting like themselves, that the person that are they a great, outstanding student? Are they very involved in your neighborhood in some, volunteer capacity or through your church? Have they started to be reserved? Are they, wearing different clothing? Maybe they're covered up now, and it's the middle of a hot Florida summer, which we know can be not pleasant. Why is there, a young person or any really individual, wearing clothes to cover their body? Are they looking at the ground? They're not communicative in a way that maybe you once knew. I think kind of running through those list of questions and then the physical indicators, familiarizing yourself with those, because I think we all know, man or woman, when we're in a situation and just something doesn't feel right in our gut. We don't know why. We can't put our finger on it. We might be too frightened or scared maybe to say anything in the moment because we're doubting ourselves. But there's just something, especially as a parent, as a guardian, people who volunteer with children or young kids. Kids are kids at the end of the day. And if there's something that you're feeling, there might be the reason why. So knowing those kind of questions to ask yourself, and then knowing it's okay to call the hotline or to call your local law enforcement. I think we live in an age where we're so connected with our devices and through technology, but we're not on a human-to-human and interpersonal level sometimes, where we don't want to get involved. We don't want to say anything. We don't want to ruffle any feathers, because what if we're wrong? But what if you're right and you just placed a phone call that led to an investigation to save someone's life?
And Erin, that follows exactly onto the next question, which Susie Glatt asked, which is, if we suspect a victim, who do we notify?
So the important thing is Those situations might not look violent or anything like that on the surface. I would never encourage anyone to approach a victim or someone who you suspect is trafficking an individual. The most appropriate is to call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you sense immediate danger, obviously call 911. Our law enforcement partners throughout the state, but I know especially in Broward County, have specific investigative and human trafficking units where these police personnel and law enforcement personnel are trained in a more substantive, longer term manner than maybe someone who's working in a different unit. But always never hesitate to call 911 if you think something is going on immediately. But then always, you can always report it to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The National Human Trafficking Hotline routes all calls to their local jurisdictions. But never approach a situation where you might feel someone's being exploited. Please leave that to law enforcement and the appropriate personnel.
Now, Erin, that number, is that blue campaign number, the 888 number?
Yes, 888.
So that number is 888-373-7888, or you can text help or info to 233-733. And thank you, Greg, so much for putting that information in the chat for everybody to see. I wanted to go to the next question, which is from Aileen Smith, who asks, are school boards embracing the training for teachers? We know teachers are on the front lines of and in the lives of our students more than most people that the students come into contact with. So have you seen school boards embracing this education?
So I will say yes. I have not personally communicated with all 67 school districts. I've communicated with a lot of them. And I will say that all districts submitted their plans on time last year, which is amazing. I know the Department of Education is going through and reviewing those. And then for the next school year, those will be due later this calendar year. They have an amazing curriculum specialist. There are so many different resources that are available to our school district personnel and our educators. And the one thing that I will mention is that it's not just for the in-classroom instructors and teachers. It is for our individuals in the front office, our guidance counselors, especially our folks who are working in our cafeterias, our bus drivers, and they're required to take that training as well. But I have seen great adoption. You're required to by the Department of Education, but just that all school districts submitted their plans before the deadline or on the deadline, I think resonates that this is an important topic. Just like mental health, substance abuse and use education, it's so appropriate that all of our learners at every age are equipped with age appropriate information about this important topic. So I would definitely say yes. And I know that the representative and Beth will share additional resources after this presentation, but the Department of Education has all the districts' curriculums for all the different age levels on their website. It's very easy to navigate. So if you have any questions about what your school district is doing in Broward, it's on their website, but also you can see what other districts are doing as well.
And just to follow up on that, Erin, is that the best place for parents to go to get information on how they should talk to their children, depending on what their child's age is? So say you have an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old. Where is the best place for the parents to go? Is it the school board sites? Where should they go to find that age appropriate content?
Sure. For consistency purposes, my recommendation would always be to go to your local school district site because you can see the curriculum or the worksheets and kind of the information that will be shared with your child. So having that same message I think is really, really important. I would start with that. And then also for other instructional videos in other languages and infographics and things that maybe if your child is a visual learner, I'm a visual person. If I see it on, a picture or photograph, I'm more likely to remember it. The Department of Homeland Security's website, dhs.org, which was on our slide, and again, you'll receive after this, is a great resource just for some national things that, again, I know that a lot of the districts are already using, but just to see some other materials that are out there as well. But definitely first start with your school districts, your county's district's website.
Thank you for that. And then just generally, what can all of us on this Zoom call and everybody who's watching, what can we do to make a difference to help stop human trafficking?
You did it by attending this town hall. Taking, an hour out of your evening is the first step, because if we don't know, if we're not armed with education, we can't prevent or know what to do if we come upon a potential, exploitive or human trafficking situation. The second thing I would say is take our training. It's free, it's 1 hour. It goes through the different types of scenarios for human trafficking, sex trafficking, and labor trafficking in real actor portrayal modules. It's very user-friendly. After every module, our law enforcement board member comes on to kind of provide an overview of what the viewer just saw, to explain the things and the key indicators or some of the questions that you might have asked yourself while watching it, but to reinforce some of the things that you've learned. And again, that training, which you'll receive afterwards. Also, be remiss, because we do have the representative with us and some other folks, talk to your elected officials. We have been very progressive and forward-thinking in the state of Florida since 2012 on policies related to human trafficking. In 2012, we passed the Safe Harbor Act. And since then, truly, the state has done a lot. This past legislative session, the legislature passed and the governor signed into law records expungement for victims of human trafficking, which is so important. So if you're a survivor and you committed a crime while a victim of human trafficking, it takes a long period of time for that record to be expunged. But now, because again, people travel from place to place, victims are moved from place to place. They're not just staying in one zip code, they're moving around. And so if they have a record from multiple counties, especially within the state of Florida, now there's a more seamless process. And it's so important as these survivors work to get their lives back on track, to go through the appropriate services and mental health services, but also to know that they can get a job and apply for credit or an apartment lease or get a mortgage one day. So that was really, really huge. But definitely having conversations with your elected representatives on the local level, because that's the community you live in and you interact with and see these individuals all the time. But know what your congressional and federal elected officials are doing as well. There's a lot of different things that our federal representatives have proposed. It takes a little bit longer, unfortunately. So that's why it's great to have conversations like this tonight, to bring some of the ideas you might think of afterwards to Representative Hunschofsky and her team. And others to potentially file a bill. I know there's a lot of discussion about some more substantive policies to curtail demand. And then also to provide more funding for direct service providers and awareness education providers. So we're really hitting both ends of the prevention training and also the demand side.
Thank you, Erin. And there is one more question in the chat. Angie D. Michelle was asking, are we seeing victims who are already starting to try to get their records expunged since that legislation took effect July 1st?
We are. If you know a trained attorney in this area, I encourage you to ask them to do some pro bono work. As we know, the legal system, even for parking tickets, can be challenging. But imagine going through the court system after being a victim of human trafficking. We have amazing survivor advocates who receive specialized training similar to the Guardian ad litem program. That was another component of the legislation that was passed this session. So as their attorneys are working with them through the expungement process, they have a victim and survivor advocate it, to help them, to be supportive in whatever manner that survivor needs. But yes, we definitely know of a lot of different cases throughout the state. I know the Florida Bar has training in this area and is discussed doing more in the future. But if you know anyone from the legal community, it's so needed. And there will be more victims coming forward when they feel appropriate. But I'm glad that they're able to do so because of the work that the legislature did.
Thank you so much, Erin. And I think the one message we're hearing here, at least I'm hearing here, is a similar message that we hear when we're talking about suicide and mental health, and pretty much any other struggle in our society, is that we need to talk about it. We need to talk about the fact that it's happening. We need to, raise awareness and educate. And I appreciate all the work you're doing on it. I suggest to everybody who's watching this to take the 1-hour course and get certified, and talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. And this is how we can bring an end to this, or at least mitigate it in the short term. So, and I know we will be probably meeting next week, Erin, to talk about the legislative session. So I just want to thank you. Last call for anybody in the chat if there are any other questions. And I just want to thank everybody who came on tonight, took the time to join us. I would be remiss if I didn't thank Beth Lerner, who's my legislative aide, who's here and helped put this whole thing together. And of course, the amazing Greg Gale, who is the Zoom moderator, coordinator extraordinaire. And I see there's one more question. Angie asks also, is there any way to know how many victims so far have expunged or started that process? And is that number being tracked in any way?
So I don't know the answer to that about how many victims have started the process. I know of a few just because of the attorneys that they're working with. I know that there is a way to be able to cull through the data. I don't know the answer now, but I can get that to the representative's office. It's just in its initial phases. These things take a period of time, unfortunately, but now the law encouraging prosecutors to take that aggressive pro-prosecution stance against traffickers, and then also to help victims and survivors of human trafficking. I think we'll hear a lot more about it. So I will get that to you. So it's TBD, and I know it's being worked on, and I'm sure that by the time session rolls around during the next calendar year, we'll have some initial data to be able to report.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Erin. And like I said, thank you to everybody who took the time out to be here tonight to learn about this. And please spread some awareness, take the class. And Erin, again, thank you for all you do in this area. We really appreciate it. This was incredibly informative. Thank you so much for that. And with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Please remember, our office is here to help you, to serve. So contact us at any time. Our telephone number in the office is 954-956-5600, or you can email us at hdist096@myfloridahouse.gov. And with that, I wish everybody a wonderful evening.